gantā na tiṣṭhati tāvad agantā naiva tiṣṭhati anyo gantur agantuś tṛtīyo tiṣṭhati.
Gantā na tiṣṭhate tāvad, agantā naiva tiṣṭhati, anyo gantur agantuś tṛtīyo tiṣṭhati. MMK chapter 2 verse 15. The goer right now does not stop. The non-goer most certainly does not stop. What third one then, being different from the goer and the non-goer, does stop? So the grammar of this verse is readily understood by referring back to verse 8, which is exactly the same, except you've got a gacchate and gacchati, he goes, instead of tiṣṭhate and tiṣṭhati, he stops. And it's also understood with reference to verse 1. So if you remember verse 1, agatam na gamyate tāvad, agatam naiva gamyate gata vini muktam gamyamanam na gamyate. So that one, verse 1 begins by saying, the past is not visited. The future is not visited. And then, so those are the past is not visited, the future is not visited. Then the third possibility, gamyamanam, the present, the now being visited, is that visited? Answer, no. Gamyamanam na gamyate. So that's a negation of the two obvious possibilities. Can you visit the past? No. Can you visit the future? Can you be mindful? Can you experience? Can you go to the future? No. Can you go to the past? No. Can you go to the future? No. Can you go to the present? That's the third possibility. And the answer there is no. But then in verse 8, it's gantā na gacchate tāvad, agantā naiva gacchati, anyo gantur agantuś tṛtīyo gacchati. The goer right now does not go. The non-goer most certainly does not go. What third one then, being different from the goer and the non-goer, does go? So if you refer back to verse 8, I was left treating that as an open question. So existence, it exists. A goer exists is the eternity view. We reject that. A goer does not exist. That's the view of annihilation. We reject that. So a non-goer, one who is not a goer, a non-existent goer, we reject that view. So those two possibilities of a goer and a non-goer, they certainly are not the subjects of the action of going or the subject of stopping. But then the question is, is there a third one who's different from the goer and the non-goer? So the third pattern of this verse is the same as the third pattern of 2:8. Anyo gantur agantuś. Anyo, anyaha, means one who is different, one who is other. Gantur agantuś means from the goer and from the non-goer. So is there a third one, tṛtīyo, who, ka, is different from the goer and the non-goer? And so if we use verse 1 as our guide, the answer will be no, there isn't. It's the same, in the same way that the now being visited is not visited, the answer will be no. But verse 8 and verse 15 are not negations exactly. You can interpret the second line as a rhetorical question, and the answer is no. But I started to talk about, in connection with verse 8, the chapter of Shobogenzo called Butsu Kojo no Ji. Then, as is my wont, I went off on a thread and forgot the point I wanted to make. But in Butsu Kojo no Ji, which means the matter of Buddha going on up, or Buddha going beyond, or going beyond Buddha, depending on whether you regard Butsu as the subject or the object or both. In any case, the important word for me is kojo. Ko means directing and jo means up. So, as someone who is led by interest in upright postures, so the Alexander technique, the essence of which is going up, that phrase, Butsu Kojo no Ji, interested me a lot after I started the Alexander technique. And that got me into trouble. But rather than digress again, rather going down that well-worn path of resentment and complaint, the point I was intending to make is that in that chapter, hibutsu, there's a phrase hibutsu, and hi means different from, butsu means Buddha. So hibutsu on the surface means someone who's different from Buddha, someone who's not Buddha. But in Butsu Kojo no Ji, hibutsu means a real Buddha, who is different from what people think, and different from what a Buddha thinks and feels, different from what other people think and feel. So hibutsu means a Buddha in action, action being empty. So a Buddha who's part of the unfolding happening of empty Dharma. That's what hibutsu means. And such a Buddha is not what people conceive as being a Buddha. It's not our idealistic conception of what Buddha is. So, to digress again, when I understood the importance of thinking in Alexander work, I revisited Master Dogen's teaching about shiryo and hishiryo. So hishiryo means different from thinking. And Guru Nishijima's explanation was hishiryo just means action. To act is different from thinking. But another way of understanding hishiryo is thinking, which is different from what people think. And that is precisely what Alexander talks about. Is thinking, but not what you understand by thinking. So head forward and up. You don't do that direction. You can't do it. If you try and do it, you get the opposite thing. You get the head pulling back and down. So head forward and up. You say it and you mean it. And to mean it is to think it. But it isn't to do it. So and neither is it just to think it like you, it doesn't mean to think it intellectually. It doesn't mean to think about it. It means to fucking think it. Head forward and up. It's much more real than people realise. Head forward and up. Like some Alexanders say, think about a balloon. They kind of speak to you very softly, so because they don't want you to encourage you to do anything. So just imagine, don't do it, but just imagine your head is like a helium balloon floating to the ceiling. So think about it. No, head forward and up. That's the way Marjorie Barlow told me to think. You don't have to dance around it. Head forward and up. Forward, you can't do it, but it means something definite. It means not fucking back. Head forward. Let your head go forward. Forward and up. Again, I once said to Nellie Ben-All, looking for confirmation, which is always a mistake, because Nellie was very fond of saying not that. So I said to Nellie, it's a wish, isn't it? Head forward and up. It's a wish. It's something you're wishing for. And Nellie said in answer, yes, it's wishing, but it's wishing that won't take no for an answer. So it's not wishy-washy wishing. Head forward and up. So when Nellie was given a direction, sometimes following her teacher Patrick MacDonald, she would repeat the direction again, waiting for it to mean something. Head forward and up. Head forward and up. Head forward and up. It's really the Alexander koan. What does it really mean? Head forward and up, to think that direction. head forward and up. I'm suggesting for your contemplation that when Master Dogen or Master Yaksan Igen in China spoke about Hishiryo, the monk asked him, what are you thinking? He said, I'm not thinking. I'm thinking, not thinking. How do you think not thinking? He said, answer is Hishiryo. Hishiryo. So, non-thinking. So, Hibbutsu means non-Buddha. Non-thinking, non-Buddha. And so, people think that Hishiryo means it's different from thinking. It's action. Just fucking do it, you know. 1, 2, 3, go. You know. So like it's the punk rock approach to Zen. Just fucking do it, man. No, that's wrong. That's false. That's what the Buddha calls samskara, doings born of ignorance. If you just do it, what you get is you just following your habit. So again, if you go back to the Mindfulness Sutra, the whole body informed with thought. Sabakaya patisamvedi, our breathing. So Sabakaya patisamvedi means being aware of the whole body first, not just fucking doing it willy-nilly, following your instinct. First thing is to be mindful of the whole body. Then, the next stage is you go into action. This is precisely what Marjorie Barlow taught me on the teaching table. First of all, you say no to doing it. The whole body informed with thought. Then you just fucking do it. But the just fucking doing it follows, it's like selfishness, unselfishness. Don't just go willy-nilly into doing it. So Hishiryo, again, I'm suggesting, if it just means action which is different from thinking, it's like Zen at war. Take your sharp sword out and chop off the heads of those subhuman Chinese. No, that's because you totally misunderstood the Buddha's teaching like that. So it's not just do action which is different from thinking. I'm suggesting Hishiryo is thinking. Thinking which is different from what you thought, so non-thinking. And the basis for me putting that forward is Hibbutsu. Hibbutsu is non-Buddha. It doesn't mean a person who's different from a Buddha. It means a Buddha who's different from what you thought. So on that basis, I'm open to the possibility that there's the goer, there's a non-goer, and in the middle way, the question is, who is there? And does anyo, gantur, agantuś mean a third one who is different from the two views? From the view that a goer exists and the view that a goer doesn't exist. So those two views are like the left and right in politics. The right affirms the individual and the left affirms a society in which the individual doesn't have autonomy. You know, so the right-wing view is that suffering is caused from the self, and the left-wing view is suffering is caused by others, by society. And the Buddha's teaching about dependent arising is both those views are not true. Suffering is dependently arisen. So in this verse also I'm suggesting that Nagarjuna, one way or the other, he's pointing us to the middle way. The middle way, as mentioned in chapter 24, Ya pratitya samutpadaha tam shunyatam tam prachakshmahe. So ya pratitya samutpadaha, whatever dependent arising there is, shunyatam tam prachakshmahe, we call that emptiness. Sa pragnapti rupadaya, making this teaching into one's own possession. Pratipat saiva madhyama is the middle way itself. So that we're here to deepen our understanding of what the Buddha taught, which is the middle way. 20 years ago, after I trained as an Alexander technique teacher and I wanted to set up a practice, professional practice, I was advised, I did a course in being a reflex inhibition therapist just after I trained as an Alexander teacher. And I was advised on that course, you want to, find a name for your practice. So I called mine the Middle Way Re-Education Centre. The re-education came from the Alexander school I trained at was called the Alexander Re-Education Centre. Alexander work is a kind of, my Alexander head of training, Ray Evans, called it vestibular re-education. You're re-educating the vestibular system. Because the vestibular system is basically how you sense where up is. And see, 20 years ago, I understood the middle way in those terms. So the two sides were the two mistakes the vestibular system makes in sensing where up is. So one kind of up is you're in the grip of the Morrow and tonic labyrinthine reflex, as Ray Evans used to say it. Because when you sit like this, like a frightened cat, you're actually going with the fear reflex, which is a sort of hypertonic pattern, and a tonic labyrinthine reflex, which is in extension. It's like this. It's a gripping in extension. The back muscle is kind of gripped in an extensor pattern. So that is one sort of faulty vestibular functioning to sit like this, hyperextended. So this is one way. You're really doing what you feel to be the upright posture, and then the other way is the sort of it's quite a relief actually. It's a very relaxed posture that you see especially in the Southeast Asian mindfulness traditions, where you become a monk, and really that's it. Once you become a monk, you've hit the jackpot really in terms of karmic merits. There's nothing else for you to do really apart from not stop being a monk. So whether you're a monk or a lay person, the way you tend to practice is like this, and then you're aware of the skandhas, the five constituents of a individual person, and so you sit there all day being mindful and calming the breath, thinking. When the Buddha said pasambayam kaya sanskara, and it means calm the body samskara. Calm the body samskara. No, it fucking doesn't. It means wake up to the fact that the body is a samskara, that the body is a confection, a convenient fiction. You aren't a body. You're here to act. You're here to be useful in the world, not just to spend your life sitting like a dumb-ass monk who doesn't understand the Buddha's teaching. So, in the middle way, to practice Zazen in the middle way is not to be in the grip of this false conception of upright posture, but neither is it to sit there all day like a sack of potatoes. So, on that level, the best way of understanding the middle way, in my opinion, is to find a good Alexander technique teacher who will teach you not that on deeper and deeper levels. So if I go and have an Alexander lesson now with Nelly Ben-Or, I know from experience that she won't say, rarely, well, she'll never say, that's right, you're doing it right. The best I'll get from her is that she would praise me for being out of the way. So I would allow her to take my head in the direction she wanted, which felt like a JCB was pulling my head out of my pelvis. But she wasn't really praising me when that happened, because I wasn't doing anything. I just understood that my job was to get out of her way and let her give me an experience of the head being directed out of the whole of me. And so once or twice Nelly had said, I can't get this kind of response out of many people. So that was the highest praise from Nelly. It meant I was out of the way, but never did she say, "Yeah, now you're doing it right." If she in other words, I never heard her praise me directing myself. Whenever I tried to direct myself, it would always be, "No, not that. No, not that," because it was either I was either stiffening up minutely, or I was doing the opposite and relaxing. See, Nelly would say sometimes, point your finger up like that. So head pulling back and down is like that, a little bit of pressure. I don't know if you can see that. My tip of my finger's going a bit white. And head forward and up is that pressure's released. So you can't do that. It's a release. So when you try, if I think head forward and up, I'm either likely to increase the pressure a little bit, or have a kind of a little collapse of the head on the neck. So I was always, for a lesson with Nelly, was always being taught not that, on finer and finer levels. And it wasn't at the end of that process, yeah, that's right, Mike, yeah, you've got it, you can go away and safely direct yourself. No. It was, say, the highest praise was, you're out of the way. You've managed to let me take your head forward and up. So Nellie Ben-Or's teacher, Patrick MacDonald, he was famous for saying, when he got the response he wanted out of his students, you shouldn't have been in the way in the first place. So it's not a question there is you there to be praised. It's when you get out of the way, then something can happen. But it wasn't. It's not you doing it. So I'm trying to sort of give a sense of non-doing is in the middle way, and non-doing is a non-coming into being of samskaras. So this is how to understand verse 11 of chapter 26. Avidyayam nirudayam samskaranam asambhavaha. Where there is stopping of ignorance, there is a non-coming into being of samskaras, a non-coming into being of doings, in other words. Avidyaya nirodastu jnanasyasya bhavanat. But the stopping of ignorance is thanks to the cultivation of just this understanding, or understanding of just this. So we're here to deepen our understanding. So going back to the middle way, say 20 years ago, I understood the middle way as I've just described it to you now. The middle way, in postural terms, is neither being too tight or being too relaxed. But in a 20 years since then, last 4 of which I've been studying Nagarjuna, my understanding of the middle way has definitely been deepened by Nagarjuna. By this verse today, I feel every verse we study is pointing us more clearly into what the middle way is. The middle way is what you walk when you've made this teaching into your own. And this teaching, the teaching in question is, whatever is dependently arisen, we call that emptiness. So again, what third one, being different from the goer and the non-goer, does stop? Is there a third one, different from the goer or the non-goer? Is the answer, there is no third one, like the same as the now being visited is not visited? Or is there a third one like Hibutsu? A Buddha is a third one, a Buddha, but not what you thought of as Buddha, because in the past you thought a Buddha was a non-empty, self-existing thing you could put up on a pedestal and devote yourself to. Whereas a non-Buddha is not a separately existing, non-empty thing. Non-Buddha might be an empty Dharma unfolding. See, a couple of verses ago, I said in passing, as I was boring everybody with my life story, I was aware that there might be something wrong with me talking about my life story like that. And then when I reflected on it, what's wrong is attachment, atmavad upadana. Atmavada means self-narrative, telling a story of the self. So atmavad plus upadana, clinging, is atmavad upadana, clinging to telling a story of oneself. And there's the four kinds of clinging is drishti upadana, clinging to views, kama upadana, clinging to desires, shilavrata upadana, clinging to virtue or discipline, and vows of practice, shila, discipline, vrata, vow, and atmavadopadana, clinging to telling stories of the self. But see, I was helped in understanding what I'm just going to tell you about now in connection with shilavratopadana, a monk in Thailand, Ananda Jyoti Bhikkhu, who is not the kind of monk I was just criticising, but extremely hard-working clarifier of the Pali Sutras, who puts my efforts totally to shame. Ananda Jyoti Bhikkhu clarified a point he clarified for my benefit a point I hadn't understood. But because you say clinging to virtue and vows of practice, understood wrongly, you think, yeah, those guys who are attached to their vows of practice, to their monkish discipline, they haven't understood. If you think that's making light of Shila Vrata, you haven't understood the meaning of it. So it's translated sometimes as clinging to mere rituals and vows, clinging to mere rituals and vows. So that is thinking light of Shila and Vrata, if you translate it like that. But actually, what the Buddha's talking about was clinging. There are four kinds of clinging, and it's even the same with desires. It's not that desire. He's making light of desires. He's making light of clinging to desires. We all have desires. The fault is in attaching to them. The fault is not in having desires, which is a human condition. The fault is attaching to desires. Kamopadana, drishtyopadana. The fault is attaching to one's views. And so Shila Vrata Upadana, Shila and Vrata are extremely important, but we shouldn't attach to them, is the point. So like in my example, I vowed in my 20s that I would practice Zazen 4 times every day. And that is a vow I've more or less kept. But if I attach to it, like if something crops up and it's really difficult to practice 4 times a day, if I can't practice 4 times a day, the attachment to the vow is no use to anybody, so that's a day to let it go, so attachment, to have virtue, discipline and vows of practice is obviously essential. That's what Ananda Jyoti Bhikkhu was clarified for my benefit. I hadn't understood it that clearly. The fault is in the attachment, not in discipline and vows of practice. So it's exactly the same with Atmavada Upadana. Everybody's got their life story. There's no fault in having a life story. The fault is in attaching to it. So thinking about that caused me to think again about Soundarananda Canto 16, where the Buddha lays out in detail for Nanda the meaning of the 4 noble truths, and he explains how to go about making the 4 noble truths, how to go about making the Eightfold Noble Path into one's own possession, into really putting into practice, applying the principles and making it your own. And at the end of that, the Buddha gives a long list of the heroes that Nanda should look to, who have heroically endeavoured. That chapter ends with the Buddha really praising the virtue of virya, persevering effort. And he says, look at all these people who've made their persevering effort on the path and have made the path their own. So that, you know, when you're translating it, that epic poem verse by verse, it's quite a big task to learn these names of individuals one after the other. You think, well, why have I got to struggle so much to look up all these individuals and try and find their biographies and so on? You know, what's Asperger's emphasising with that? And I think, of course, the point is that these were all real individuals. So, Hibutsu, they weren't just generic Buddhas that we think. They were non-Buddhas. They were people who, on an individual basis, made their effort to make the middle way into their own path. So again, in answer to the question, what third one then, being different from the goer and the non-goer, does stop? Well, I'm suggesting if you look up Soundarananda Canto 16, towards the end of it, you'll find a long list of people who might be what Nagarjuna was pointing to as third ones. Or maybe his answer is that there is no third one. Again, it's an open question. Now, well, speaking of that path of the heroic individual, I'm going to talk again about Jordan Peterson's analysis of the Pinocchio story. And I raised a question again 2 or 3 verses ago about where the US is right now in relation to the Pinocchio story, because the Walt Disney Pinocchio, which Jordan Peterson was commenting on, which he likes a lot, you know, the artwork, you know, there's some memorable graphics. So the movie was produced in such a way as the archetypes come through in a way that Jordan Peterson explains very clearly. And so Peterson's argument, and I think it was true, is that in the 80s, I was taught that the Cold War was the battle of 2 ideologies, represented by America and the Soviet Union. So America on the right and the Soviet Union on the left, and the Buddhist middle way was in the middle. Jordan Peterson counter argument is that the ideology was Marxism or communism, and what America stood for was not ideology, but was the Judeo-Christian tradition, the sort of the forward march of humanity, and that was represented by the Disney production after the Second World War, or towards the end of the Second World War, of Pinocchio. You know, the Pinocchio story is a blueprint for living a good life. Be brave, be truthful, be unselfish. And I buy Jordan Peterson's argument, hook, line and sinker. When I saw his videos, I thought, yeah, he's spot on. He's teaching the middle way. He's upholding the middle way. So he solved that koan. In the 80s, that's a koan I struggled with. I didn't solve it. When I heard Jordan Peterson's lecture, I thought, yeah, hats off to Jordan Peterson. He solved that koan. But then the question is, where is the US now in that story? See, I've got a degree in accounting and financial management, of all things. And when I was doing accounting between 1978 and 81 at university, it was the question that really interested me in the accounting course was organisational effectiveness. What makes an organisation effective? And that was my own koan, before I met Nishijima Roshi and heard about this koan of America versus Russia, the koan I was struggling with was goals or systems. They were the two approaches to explain what makes an organisation effective. Is it the goals approach or is it the systems approach? And the solution I understood a couple of years ago doing this translation is that goals and systems are not non-empty things. So goals are empty of themselves but full of systems, and systems are empty of themselves but full of goals. So an effective organisation has goals and systems which are empty of themselves but full of each other. That's the solution to the koan, which might not make any sense to you, but when I understood that, I realised I'd solved the koan for my own benefit after 45 years. 35 years, from 20 to 55. So 35 years it took me to solve that koan, but it was solved by studying MMK. But that isn't the solution that was accepted or arrived at in the business schools of America. What gained prominence in those business schools was that an effective organisation is one that maximises shareholder value. And that is really what has caused America, I think, to lose its mojo. Besides the fact that it went off the gold standard in 1971 and so had what the French call the exorbitant privilege of printing the world's reserve currency. So America, since 1971, has been able to pay for anything it wanted just by printing dollars. And that was possible as long as the world priced oil in particular in dollars. So you got the recycling of petrodollars, so called. And I think the reason now that we're getting this conflict between America and China is that guys with guns in America are beginning to realise that that's no longer working. Yeah, it's worked until now because China has bought US Treasury bonds, allowing America to buy all the weaponry that it can point towards China. But I think the third quarter of 2016, China stopped buying Treasury bonds on net, and so since then we've got a different story unfolding. And I'm relying for this information, especially on a person I follow on Twitter called Luke Groman, who for me is right on top of all these things, and I find his analysis very convincing. Well, another person I follow is Jonathan Tepper, who wrote a book recently called The Myth of Capitalism, which is I haven't read the book, but I read the first chapter and followed the argument, explaining, for example, how the likes of Warren Buffett he's made his money by betting on these big oligarchical corporations that are not exactly monopolies, but they've got a large degree of monopoly power. It's like the American airline industry, for example. You've got these big airlines with their little monopolies over their own hub airports, and so that's the background. You see these horror stories of American airlines really screwing over their passengers, sometimes with spectacular results, like the doctor who was, punched in the face by security guards and dragged screaming off the plane, and so on. So I do see a connection there between my struggle with trying to understand what makes an organisation effective and the big conflict we're facing in the world right now between America and China. And the conclusion I've got about it, the most important thing, again, is this thing of taking sides, not taking sides. You see, a lot of Buddhists take sides with Tibet against China. And, you see these people with such superficial understanding jumping on the bandwagon to say how terrible China is, when China's, how many millions of people has China pulled out of poverty over the last 30 or 40 years? And how has it been possible for China to do that? Well, it's been facilitated by the top 1% in America, the big investment banks and so on, who've been basically exporting dollars and treasury bonds, while China do all the hard work, all the hard manufacturing work. So that was great for the 1% in Washington and the surrounding areas, who've seen America become hyper-financialized. But the poor middle class and working class Americans in flyover country have been absolutely screwed over. There again, ridiculous proportion of the American black population is incarcerated. So America seems to be a society that's got out of balance in the process of the 1% helping China to industrialize. And so now that process seems to be coming to an end, and we're looking at conflict. And I hate it. I hate to be on this. I never want to be on the side of a group of people who think they're all right in taking sides against someone else. So, I'm sorry to the Dalai Lama and Matthieu Ricard, but I'm not on the side of Tibet against China whatsoever. So the Dalai Lama says that the best way of understanding the Buddha's teaching is to follow the Tibetan model. No, I don't agree. The best way is to study Nagarjuna in Sanskrit, not in Tibetan. That's the truth. So much as the Dalai Lama, as I hear him, tells the truth on that point, he's not telling the truth. He's biased in favour of Tibet because he thinks the best way of understanding Nagarjuna is to read it in Tibetan. But no, it's not. The best way is to go back to Nagarjuna's own words and read it in the Sanskrit. So it's not that I'm for China against Tibet, but I'm just certainly not against China and taking sides with Tibet. Tibet in the 1930s, 1940s, however great the Dalai Lama is as an individual practitioner, Tibet was a kind of theocracy. It was a crap society. So my conclusion is the enemy is not the holders of the wrong views. So the Chinese obviously are not in the middle way insofar as the ideology of communism is being upheld, and the individual is not being respected within that. So that's to that extent, you can say the Chinese system is off the middle way. But the mistake is to blame the holder of the view. The enemies of the middle way are two views: Shashvata Drishti, the eternity view, and Ucheda Drishti, the view of annihilation. And if you're talking about the individual, then communism is Ucheda Drishti. It's a negation of the individual, an affirmation of the state. But that doesn't mean that China is evil, that the Chinese people are evil, because superficially that's the ideology of the state, of the Communist Party. Who are you going to blame for your suffering? Yourself or others? Neither is the answer, because suffering is dependently arisen. That's the thing which Nagarjuna is constantly pointing us to, the middle way, and the enemy is the two views, not the holders of those views.
गन्ता न तिष्ठति तावद् अगन्ता नैव तिष्ठति अन्यो गन्तुरगन्तुश्च कस्तृतीयोऽथ तिष्ठति।